I'm Amanda.
I'm Cara.
And welcome to the Historical Society podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Yay. So we are in different locations again. I'm sporting my glasses as we're recording it early in the morning. And Cara's over in KC.
Have you not worn those yet?
I don't remember. I actually was trying to think if I've worn them yet for an episode. I'm not sure. I feel like there may have been one episode, but I can't remember which one.
Lucky listeners.
Lucky listeners. I'm going to sound smarter because I have my glasses on today.
I need glasses.
I shouldn't promise that at the top, though.
Yeah. You got to push them up with your
That's
finger.
right. My middle finger.
There you go.
Okay, so today's episode is sort of a holiday kind of theme, sort of. It's going to be called either Abolition and Christmas or Christmas and Abolition, something like that, or Christmas and Anti-Slavery. Anti-Slavery Christmas?
Nothing says the holidays like slavery.
Yep.
Talk of slavery.
Talk of slavery, yes. Christmas.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
We are in the United States.
Yeah, seems fitting.
Okay.
So, so this story comes from the 1800s, but we're gonna kind of just talk really quickly about something from the 1700s. So, despite slavery being outlawed in the state of Massachusetts in 1783, so there were still many pro-slavery citizens in the state and, of course, in the United States. And so I guess technically that's still in the 1800s, the way I read that. I forgot I was going to read the sentence that way. So in the state of Massachusetts, slavery had been outlawed in 1783, which I actually didn't know. I didn't know any of the information we're going to say. And I forget how I ran across this story. I think I Googled like Christmas and activism or something, and this story popped up. So
it is kind of interesting, right, that we're going to be talking about what it was like in the North.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah. And so that's what surprised me.
Which we make a lot of assumptions
Yeah.
about.
I was talking to my mom this morning when we were walking Coda, and I said, I feel like depending on where you were raised, the way you learn your history in the United States changes. So in the North, like Maryland it's called the Old Line State. It's sort of like in the middle. So you had like parts of it probably were part of the Confederacy, and then parts were part of the North. But where I grew up, we kind of viewed the North as, at least the way I interpreted my history lessons, the North was this shining city on a hill kind of a concept where...
Yep, that's how I...
Yeah, and where they were like, it was this anti-slavery part of the country. And I think it trickled down into me thinking it was like this anti-racism part of the country as well.
So, but it's probably, well, I don't know if it's fair to say by and large it was.
Well,
with a mix of.
So obviously,
I guess we should get into this.
Yeah. So obviously, slavery was outlawed in 1783, but I don't think it was. I feel like it was probably like we think of our country today, where being in Missouri. I'm going to say like 40% of the Missouri still voted for Kamala Harris, but then 60%. So there's still always, there's pockets. And there are percentages. I don't know. I didn't find, or I didn't look for, that's better. That's really the truth. I didn't look for research that would have told us like maybe estimates of the population of the North and how they would have viewed slavery.
It makes sense though that, it wouldn't necessarily line up. The mentality wouldn't line up with
everybody.
A line in the sand.
Right. Yeah. But obviously, I mean, the North clearly had a certain stance on slavery eventually, but we don't know the percentage of people who did not hold that view who lived in the North. So that's the part we don't know. And maybe there's a paper on it, and maybe after this episode I can find it. Okay. So, I wanted to start by highlighting a few people that will kind of be in this story. The first is a man named William Lloyd Garrison, and he was born in 1805, died in 1879, and he made it his life's mission to fight against slavery and other injustices. Okay. And there's an article. So I didn't do my sourcing. Uh-oh. So really quickly, I'll probably read some of these article titles later, but I got a lot of my information from the National Park Service's website, so nps.gov. And all of their articles, they don't actually have authors listed, so it's just part of their historical sites, the historical sites. And so if you wanted to find these,
TM.
what?
I said TM.
TM.
Trademark.
Yeah, trademark. We don't have a trademark yet. We would like to get one. That costs money though, so that's why we don't have one.
Yeah. Just kidding. Scratch that.
Okay, so one of the articles, if you were to look up Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society office, that's one article on nps.gov. There was a William Lloyd Garrison one, and then the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society is another, and then Maria Weston Chapman is another. And then I will read an article from Saturday Evening Post from an article, not all of the article. Then another project called the ZIND Project, ZINNED project.org, that had a great little tidbit on it, a great summary. And there was a history.com video that was cool to watch. It was about this story as well. So there are a couple of places you could find this. All right, so from the National Parks website, I'm going to read from it, just a few little snippets. So William Lloyd Garrison, this is about him. A printer, newspaper publisher, radical abolitionist, suffragist, civil rights activist, William Lloyd Garrison spent his life disturbing the peace of the nation in the cause of justice. And it's interesting because his views on how he thought of slavery changed when he came in contact with people who had been slaves or were just simply Black Americans. So he originally he was a believer in what was called the gradual emancipation or recolonization plan, which the people who supported this, they thought, oh, we should do this gradually. So let's leave some people in slavery and make it gradual. And then they wanted to also take the slaves and send them back to Africa. So it sounds kind of similar to stuff that's happening today.
Let's not just take care of it.
Right.
Let's do it slowly.
Let's do it slowly.
Be too shocking
And then
for everyone.
they're not Americans. We need to ship them away. Right? They're not real Americans. That's like what stuff we're hearing today. So
You got to figure money weight into this.
Oh, 100%. I think that's what it's all about. Which is not shocking, considering, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he changed, but this guy, kudos to him. He realized this is not the way to go. And so, yeah, so it would be so the process it would have been slowly ending slavery, and that would have been bad. And then he reversed his ideas. Okay. So let's see. I can't remember. My notes are confusing me a little bit. So to summarize him a little bit more, he spent his life trying to immediately end slavery and help Black Americans and women find equality. And he actually ended up facing down an angry pro-slavery mob after giving a lecture at an anti-slavery meeting, and they tied him up with a rope and drug him around the town and beat him up. So he faced literal physical suffering because of his stances. And this is a quote that he gave at a women's suffrage meeting. He said, "I am still for immediate, unconditional, everlasting emancipation from oppression of everyone on the face of the earth." That's really wonderful quote by him.
Wow.
Talking's hard.
Immediate
emancipation. Yeah, for everybody.
That's awesome.
And so after, slavery was outlawed in the country finally, he went on to fight for women's suffrage as well and equality. Cool. Yeah.
I think that's called integrity.
I think so, good lady.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. One of the organizations he was a member of was the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. And this society was founded in 1834 and was a chapter of the National Anti-Slavery Society. Members of the society called for the immediate end to slavery, and they hoped to accomplish this goal by moral suasion, political action, and direct aid to fugitive slaves.
Moral suasion.
I took that it was a quote from the National Parks website that they pulled from I think their documents.
I like it. It's a
Yeah,
good word.
I think it should be persuasion. But
Well, was it
what do I know?
was it a word they used back then
Maybe.
specifically? I mean, it makes I like it. I mean,
Do
it
you want
speaks.
to? We should look up. I could look it up real fast. Do you want me to?
No, I'll look
Okay.
it up while you keep going.
All right. We'll figure out if that's a modern word. I don't think it is.
Moral suasion.
Anyway,
I like
yeah.
it.
So
Okay, give me
the
a second.
society encouraged another formation of society for all women. So this is the one that we're going to kind of focus on today. It's called the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society, and it was founded in 1833. Oh, what's interesting, this was formed before the other one. Okay, so no. Opposite. Okay, so this one was founded in 1833. Yep.
Okay. So it's a strategy, obviously, that uses persuasion to influence people to adopt a certain behavior or belief system.
So it's
based on
It's totally a word.
based on ethics. Based on ethics, and it says the term originated in the 18th and 19th centuries in Britain and North America, where it was used in the temperance movement to reduce consumption of alcohol. Interesting. It was also a key tactic in the abolitionist movement, where it was used to end slavery.
Interesting. Okay, so it's a word. It's not like an old word.
It's a term.
Yeah, moral suasion.
It's a term.
Learned something new today. Whoa.
Pretty
My
cool.
brain got bigger.
Okay. I don't know.
Felt it happen. It's,
Wow. Wow. I don't think you
I don't
did.
think so. Yeah, no.
I don't think so. I don't
Yeah.
think so either.
Okay, so the what is it called? The Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society. So that group was founded again 1833, and it was founded by 12 women, one of whom was Maria Weston Chapman. And the society would go on to include black women, white women, rich, middle, and working class women. So it was pretty progressive in its membership for that time frame, which is great. All right, so the next thing I was going to talk about, next person, is Maria Weston Chapman. And she was born in 1806 to Warren and Nancy Weston of Weymouth, Massachusetts. Despite the family not being wealthy, they still had connections to powerful people. These connections helped Maria have opportunities not afforded to other women of similar backgrounds. She was able to finish her education in England and went on to become a principal of the Young Ladies High School in Boston. She then married abolitionist Henry Grafton Chapman, and from there she began her activism. Mr. Chapman's family used their business to take a stand against slavery by refusing to sell goods produced by slave labor. And that was kind of a big deal, I think, because,
Wow.
yeah, so they probably took financial hits because they chose to do that.
That's really, really big.
Yeah. And then William Lloyd Garrison, he wrote a little snippet himself. We have a quote of his talking about the Chapman family. He said,
Okay.
of the Chapman family, almost the only, if not the only, mercantile houses in the country which sacrificed a profitable Southern business to their deep conviction of the sin of slavery.
It's almost the only, if not the only.
Yeah.
Wow.
So maybe, yeah. So that was really profound. So they were really, it sounds like people of strong integrity, like you said earlier.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, too few people do that.
They put their money where their mouth is.
Well, honestly, you do pay a
Yeah,
price.
they paid the price and they did it willingly.
You always lose something
Yeah.
when you do something that's unpopular.
Yeah. And so the next thing I was going to read, so we're kind of like learning information right now. We learned about William Lloyd Garrison, then we learned about Maria Weston Chapman, and now there's a quote I have from the founding documents of the females, the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society. So this is from their constitution. Believing slavery to be a direct violation of the laws of God and productive of a vast amount of misery and crime, and convinced that its abolition can only be effected by an acknowledgement of the justice and necessity of immediate emancipation, we hereby agree to form ourselves into a society to aid and assist in this righteous cause as far as lies within our power. So that's kind of their deal. So reading about this on the National Parks website, I also learned that, unfortunately, the society only lasted 7 years, and that's just because of disagreements on how to proceed and the causes to champion. But, they still were able to accomplish a lot of great things before that dissolution. And that's something we kind of see. So when we did our episode on women's suffrage, we found that the women's groups, there will always be disagreements. And, they actually split off into two separate organizations. And I think there was like another split. And so people always have different ways of wanting to move forward. But
Yeah. Yeah, and almost you see that today too, with like who deserves to be liberated first.
Right.
Which marginalized group deserves to be liberated first?
Yeah.
Why not work toward the whole everyone being liberated?
Right. And there's also in our own industry there's there's kind of like infighting with how we should talk about DEI stuff, or just talk about
it's kind of what I was talking about.
And talk about women's safety, women's health, and it's interesting because a lot of people get angry at certain people who they think are being too abrasive or too whatever. They're not doing it right. But something I learned from the history of women's suffrage was that at the very end there was a part of the women's suffrage movement that they were very vocal. They would go out and protest in front of the White House. And many of them got arrested because of that, for just peaceful protest, basically. And then there were other women who were angry that they were doing that, and they took a different approach and tried to be like more of the supportive, like they were trying to support the war effort and show how important they were in the workplace and all of that. And in the end, what happened was that both of those groups are viewed today as they needed to do that. They both needed to do that because they pushed the needle to the place where women eventually got the right to vote. But both ways of doing it were important to changing the mind of, I believe it was Woodrow Wilson and other people to push that legislation forward.
Yeah, and I feel like I would say that there are different groups that deserve to be seen and for things to change. But I think that can all kind of be done concurrently. Like I think we can just do it. We could just include everyone's issues. I don't know. That seems to be. I don't really want to get into it, which is why I'm not saying a whole lot. But I think when one marginalized group gets a lot of attention, sometimes other marginalized groups get upset. Why aren't we getting the same attention?
Right. Yeah. I think it's funny. We're kind of talking about two separate issues about the same issue. So you're talking about.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So you're talking about well, really, I think everybody can be talked about at the same time. And I think that's okay. But I also think it's okay to focus on one group at a time. That's okay too.
I do too.
Because we all experience.
I do too,
yeah.
but that's what I'm saying is people get upset.
Right.
Because they're like, well, why are they getting this advantage right now?
Right. And
why aren't we?
Right. And then I'm talking about like the tone in which you're discussing it. People are very, they diverge on how to do that. Mm-hmm. When in reality, kind of everything is important. The work is,
I know we were talking about two different things. I
think that's interesting.
I think they're both important.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah. It took me a little time to realize you were talking about it. I'm slow.
I'm also not wanting to say a lot because I feel like that's a bigger discussion.
Oh, it is.
So I don't really want to say too much about it in the moment.
Fair enough. Well, we can move on. Back to the story. Okay, so I was going to read a quick paragraph about the fact that it was, short-lived, this society, the Anti-Slavery Society. And this is from the nps.gov website. It says, despite its relatively short existence of 7 years, the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society achieved a great deal of tangible results through its petition campaigns, fairs, publications, lectures, and other activist work. Furthermore, the actions of the members of the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society and similar female organizations were a foundational experience for many women's rights activists who received their first political education in networking, canvassing, mobilizing, and movement formation and abolition. Indeed, many continued their work in the anti-slavery movement and lent their powerful voices to the women's suffrage movement in the years and decades to come. That's kind of actually that by itself kind of talks about what we were just talking about, how the women of this movement, the anti-slavery movement,
We should have just
yeah,
kept
we should have just
reading.
kept going. All that they learned, fighting against, racial injustice, fighting against slavery, went on to help them in their quest for women's suffrage.
Well, that's why this is sort of interesting. It's like history repeats
Yeah,
itself. If we could just look back,
yeah,
we could have a template for how to move forward
exactly.
or not move forward.
Or maybe not complain about each other so much. Not be like, you're doing it wrong.
Shut
No,
up.
you're doing it wrong. Yeah,
Shut up, you're stupid.
yeah.
No, you shut
No,
up.
you shut up. Okay. So back to Christmas. So the reason we're focusing on this right now is because the women of the society used Christmas as a way to fundraise for the Anti-Slavery Society. And it was also a way to keep the topic of abolition in the public arena. They hoped to change hearts and minds to join their cause to end slavery. Ta-da! So they had basically they ended up developing kind of like a Christmas bazaar, Christmas fairs, where they sold goods that they made themselves or other people in the community and then they would sell them, and the proceeds of the sale would go towards the sale would go towards founding or funding, not founding, funding the society. And
Pull together.
I
Stuart.
know I'm having trouble today, but this is kind of like every episode, so
No, you're not having trouble. I'm just teasing
okay.
you.
I feel like I'm having trouble. So they would use the proceeds to then support the cause of the society. So they would fund lectures and pamphlets and anything that they needed money for. This was part of it. Okay. So I thought this article that I read summarized kind of this whole experience really well. It was from the Saturday Evening Post. And what's so cool about this article was just written. It was just published. It was December 3rd, 2024. So how many days ago though? Yeah. So it's like just now.
Wow.
And the title of this, again, is from Saturday Evening Post. The title is Women's Work, the Anti-Slavery Fairs of the 1800s. Women abolitionists in the 19th century did everything they could to end slavery in the U.S., including holding annual Christmas bazaars to raise money for the cause. These fairs sold everything from needlework to books to Parisian dresses. And it's by Tanya Roth, and again, published December 3rd, 2024. So you can read this article. It's online. Okay. I'm going to read a few little paragraphs from it.
Tell me one more time where it was published.
Saturday Evening Post.
Saturday evening. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs. In 1834, Maria Chapman had an idea. Why not raise funds for their society by selling handmade goods, guaranteed free of slave labor to the local population? Thus was born the first anti-slavery fair. The first fair was held at Maria Chapman's parlor and brought in just $300, reflecting the size of the venue as well as the relatively small reach of the organization. It was their first fair in the region dedicated to the anti-slavery cause. In 1830, fundraising fairs were few, but in 1833, places like Salem and Springfield, Massachusetts, reported that similar fairs had brought in thousands of dollars for organizations like the Institute for the Blind. At first, goods for the anti-slavery fair came mostly from local women in the area, responding to calls to donate handmade items to sell, such as clothing and quilts. Organized by women, featuring wares made by women, the fairs were seen as something appropriately feminine. Events like the anti-slavery fair were a socially acceptable way for women to raise money for causes they believed were important. Women were not normally supposed to be in public, hawking goods for sale, but selling handmade crafts in the name of a charity was viewed as something in service of a higher cause. In the beginning in 1839, Chapman created an annual publication to be sold only at the fair, The Liberty Bell, a book that offered a selection of texts, including poems, essays, and stories, all with a connection to abolitionism. Authors who contributed to the Liberty Bell included the poet Henry Longfellow, philosopher and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, and the British poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning. In the 2 decades, the fair grew dramatically. Although the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society disbanded in 1840, their fair continued. The 1845 event, held in Boston's Faneuil Hall, garnered nearly $4,000 in proceeds. Items that went unsold were held over to be used in smaller local fairs across the state during the year. I thought that was kind of cool. So there's a tie. Part of the reason I wanted to tell this story was because it is so close to the holidays. So I just thought it seemed fitting. Okay. I also wanted to know what exactly they were using the funds for from these sales. And there are a couple things that this organization did. So one, they hosted and they used the money for hosting and attending lectures on anti-slavery. And number two, they started a primary school for Black girls. And number three, they organized an orphanage for orphaned Black children. And then four, they helped fund legal cases for the freedom of slaves. So there was one case in particular with a child named Med who was brought to Boston by their enslaver. The case, the title of the case was The Commonwealth versus Aves. And the case led to the immediate freedom of the child and the ruling by the state's highest court that enslaved people voluntarily brought to Massachusetts could not be held against their will. So it was a good case in that it set precedent for future enslaved people in the state of Massachusetts. Cool. Yeah. There was another quote from the document, from the society's document I wanted to read. I thought this is also about the funds. It says funds shall be appropriated to the dissemination of truth on the subject of slavery and the improvement of the moral and intellectual character of the colored population. So that's kind of another little thing. Okay, so then this was interesting, I felt like, because kind of what Cara and I talked about at the beginning of the episode, growing up, I thought the North, again, was like this haven. And I never considered, I feel like that, of course, not everybody would hold these views. Not everybody believed that slavery should be outlawed. But this really brought it home. So I learned through this research that, and this was from the article Maria Weston Chapman. Again, these don't have authors, but if you looked it up, you would find this article. Basically, it's going to talk about the fact that these women and men who had anti-slavery societies and would have lectures, they would sometimes come under attack by violent pro-slavery mobs. And so that was a thing, like even in the North. And I know, I feel, honestly, I feel a little embarrassed that this surprised me. Because I feel like when I study history, I'm constantly rocked by the things I didn't learn. And yet I shouldn't be surprised, right? Because most of the time when we're learning history in a particular area, like people don't want to learn history that makes them look bad or makes their area look bad.
You don't want to present history.
Right. They're kind of choosing to present it in a way that's more palatable to the listener or to the learner. And unfortunately, that's like a disservice. It's a big disservice because we don't ever really have a full picture of like the reality of what happened.
There's also, I mean, I'm sure this plays into it too. People have vastly different perceptions of how things have gone down. I mean,
right. Well, kind of for that reason.
Yeah.
They want to believe a certain thing about the United States. And so they craft it in a way that isn't
that's
really true.
Nature, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it totally is. Yeah. But I mean, which is unfortunate. There's just a lot of denialism.
You can present the same story to two different people, and those people are going to perceive it based on. Does that happen?
I have a quote for this. I was like,
they're gonna perceive it the way they're going to perceive it based upon all their lived experience.
Okay,
etc.
This is so fitting. I have been waiting. The other day I was like cleaning the office or something. I don't know what I was doing, looking for something, and I came across this little. This is like these are like all the old membership cards. I literally just need to shred all of these. Like I've just like they're just sitting at like all my old credit cards are expired. I need to just have a little session where I shred all of them. But they're in this thing and it's like filled. Like
awesome.
It's just an old wallet. Okay. Anyway, I saved this. This is from a fortune cookie. This little quote here. Okay, so the quote is,
why is it on the front of that thing?
I put it there. It's like a place for your driver's license, but I put the little fortune cookie there because I thought it was.
Is it relevant?
It's totally
relevant. Is
relevant.
It relevant to the cards? No, not to the situation. Is it relevant to what's inside the little pack?
It's not. I just wanted to save it. And here it's having its moment now. I've saved it for this purpose.
Can't wait.
This is from when I lived in Texas. So this little piece of paper is like at least at least 12 years old now, if not more.
believe
Okay.
it.
So the quote is from the fortune cookie.
At long
At long last.
Yeah.
So the fortune cookie's wisdom is people are not persuaded by what they say, but rather by what they understand.
It's true.
Right?
That cookie knows what it's talking about.
Yeah.
Fortune.
People are not persuaded by what they say, but rather by what they understand.
Sounded like I was calling you a cookie.
Thank you.
Cookie know what she's
I'm
talking
sweet.
about.
I know it. I'm a sweet little cookie.
Wow. That is a good quote, and I think it's true.
I'm trying to think if I were a cookie, what kind of cookie would I be?
No.
No?
we're not I wonder who writes
I
those.
would want to be a sweet and
fortunes.
salty cookie. That's my favorite flavor profile.
Okay. Cool.
What kind of cookie would you be?
I don't know.
You'd be a sour cookie. Just kidding. You'd have some Sour Patch Kids in you.
Either.
You'd be like,
Somebody left baking powder out of.
just kidding. You would not.
Actually, Sour Patch cookies are good. Have you ever had
I
them?
haven't. But I do.
Yes, you have. I made them once.
Then I have.
I
I don't
you
remember
sugar
them.
cookie dough and you put Sour Patch Kids in the dough, and they sort of like melt a little bit and they spread out, but they end up tasting like exactly what you're talking about, like sweet and sour, sweet and salty. But they're not necessarily sour.
Yeah.
It balances out. My brother made fun of me when I made them one time for Christmas, and then he loved them. So
Nice. We didn't come up with your cookie. We'll have to do that later.
that is
What
rude.
type
I'm
of
not a
cookie
sour
would you be?
I just told you.
A Sour Patch Kid cookie. But I feel like there might be another one.
No, I told you I'd be one that somebody left the baking powder.
No. It'd be a delicious cookie.
Oh god.
Okay.
Let's keep
All right.
going.
Sorry. Random. All right. So back to that article we were going to read a quote from. So the more serious topic was that the anti-slavery society and anti-slavery meetings would sometimes come under attack by pro-slavery mobs. And this one, there was a quote from here that kind of detailed it. So this is from Maria Weston Chapman, the article on the NPS.gov website. It says, quote, on October 21st, 1835, a violent mob descended upon the Boston Female Anti-Slavery Society's annual meeting. The mob dragged William Lloyd Garrison, who had offered to speak at the event, from his office and assaulted him. The mayor of Boston asked the women to end their meeting for their own safety. In response, Maria Chapman declared, if this is the last bulwark of freedom, we may as well die here as anywhere. In open defiance of the angry crowd, the women left the anti-slavery office arm in arm, enduring the insults and threats of the men around them. They proceeded to Chapman's home to finish their meeting. Well aware of the threat of mob violence that abolitionists faced, Chapman predicted that this meeting might become a target. She said, we shall be in session at Boston, and we are prepared to say that in the strength of our God, our duty shall be done. Let the events of the day be what they may. Just 3 years later, Chapman attended an anti-slavery convention in Philadelphia at the newly constructed Pennsylvania Hall. Once again, mob violence threatened the meeting. The day after she spoke, an anti-abolitionist mob burned the hall to the ground. That's Philadelphia. So you see this anti-slavery is the pro-slavery. So they burned something in Philadelphia. They were attacked in Boston. So like the concept of the North being this safe haven is not real. It's an illusion.
But also, like, it's just interesting. Like, anybody who speaks out on anything controversial can expect violence.
Yeah, it's really sad.
We're still seeing that. We're still seeing that today.
Yeah. Yep. Crazy.
That's all.
Yeah. So one more thing before we finish, I wanted to talk about. So, you know, a lot of these people who did amazing work weren't really perfect in all the things that they thought and believed. So basically when slavery ended, a lot of these people they either moved on to women's suffrage or they just kind of left the movement or stopped doing things. But obviously, as we know from history, Black Americans had no rights and they were going to be oppressed and like terrible things were going to keep happening to them, even though slavery was outlawed, because, you know, you have all this built up hatred and racism and all this terribleness, and they're going to have to then live through that after slavery was ended. So anyway, so she was kind of one of those people. So this is a quote again from that same article. When President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Chapman retired from her activist work. Ultimately, her primary cause had been for the abolition of slavery. Like many other white abolitionists, she had little interest in the fight for civil rights and equality for African Americans once slavery ended. Though she worked with African American abolitionists and reformers in various organizations, her inner circle primarily consisted of wealthy white abolitionists. Despite these glaring shortcomings, Chapman opened the door for other women to have a more assertive role in Boston's abolitionist movement, encouraging their participation in lectures, speeches, fundraising, and petitioning. So even though, like, she did great work, a lot of these people did great work, they still had, you know, this glaring shortcoming of not continuing the fight for Black Americans. So, wow. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that's it.
What is that's it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have this, I guess in our notes. Okay, so the other thing I had listed here that I could briefly talk about was kind of my own growth in my own personal growth in understanding racism in the country. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here we go. Yeah. It's funny. I was like, well, I guess we don't have to talk about this.
Maybe we shouldn't. Goodbye.
No, it's okay. No, I think it's, again, it's basically what I was saying, like what's palatable to the listener, what's palatable to the person who's telling the story. And I think, you know, again, I feel a little embarrassed by saying this, but I'm just going to say it, you know? So growing up, I feel like, you know, I came from an all white basically area of Maryland. And I learned through, and I haven't read this book, but I have it sitting here, Sundown Towns. Let me see if I'll try to get it in the frame. A hidden dimension
of American racism
by James W. Lowen.
Okay.
Do you think that's how you say his last name? Lowen?
I don't know. I'd have to ask
Yeah,
him.
Sundown Towns. So my home county is in this book, Sundown Towns.
For real?
It's
What's the county?
Garrett County, Maryland.
Garrett.
Yeah, and it's listed multiple times in here. So there was one spot.
Whoa.
Yeah, there was a story of people treating a African American jazz player really poorly, and then there was, but it was mentioned here. I was just going to read. It says this. I'll just read this little paragraph from it. This is page from 71 in the paperback. Similarly, most sundown towns and counties in Texas are in North Texas or southwest of Fort Worth, rather than in the traditionally southern areas of East Texas. Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri also show this pattern. Their sundown towns are in the hills and mountains or suburbs. Maryland's one sundown county, Garrett, in its farthest west in Appalachia, Garrett County doesn't show in Table 1, but had become overwhelmingly white by 1940. So it's just kind of listing it as one of these areas. So basically, sundown towns, it was someplace where I think I listed, I gave a better description in my notes here. Let me just double check. I think I wrote it somewhere. Maybe not. Okay, I'll just give a summary. So it's basically a place where, whether it's from laws that were instituted or just overwhelming public sentiment, that African Americans were not safe to live there, were not safe to be there, basically. And so that's, okay, I did list it. So it's where you would find towns or counties that were all white in the United States that used violence, intimidation, or discriminatory local laws to exclude non-whites. So it was somehow a combination of something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so my history comes from a place like that. And yeah, the only person of color that was in my class, there was one person, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I've never spoken to her about like what her experience was like while she lived there.
I mean,
so.
It's interesting. I had the opposite experience.
Yeah.
I went to a middle school where I was the minority. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Met a lot of really great people. I would say like it is interesting. You feel it when you're the minority somewhere. You just feel different.
Yeah.
You just feel like you don't fit in,
Right.
like you don't have a place. But you know that goes both ways,
Yeah.
or goes multitude of ways.
Yeah. It's interesting. And, I was going to talk briefly about my experience when I went to college. How, I think part of me kind of assumed racism was gone, honestly. And I think my suite mates at the time would probably be like, yeah, we all knew that. I was in a suite mate. My suite mates were, how many people were in a suite at Juilliard? It was like seven, eight girls,
Whoa, that's a
something
lot.
like
I thought
that.
it was like, well, I guess so. Four
Five
rooms. Are there
rooms.
4 rooms? 5 rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
probably had at least seven to
Some
eight
had multiple
girls.
people.
Yeah. And
I think there were 2 singles.
I,
Yeah,
I
doesn't
was the
matter.
only white person in my suite. And
Oh,
so I loved my suite mates. I'm not as in
you
touch
guys,
with.
you guys had
We
fun.
did. We would stay up really late and talk. And we would get into some really nice, heavy topics. Like we would talk about racism and things like that. And I learned a lot. And they put up
They
with
kind of
me.
made fun of you.
Yeah,
They gave you a lot of
they
crap.
did. And I deserved it. And my views changed dramatically from being around them. It's similar to William Lloyd Garrison.
Uh, it was probably in so many ways really good for you to move to New York.
Yeah,
I mean, the same is true for me. When I moved from a master's degree, I learned a lot just because I met so many different
right.
people.
I think that's the thing.
And I'm not just talking about what we're talking about today. I mean, I just met people from vastly different
Right.
backgrounds.
Yeah,
Just opens your eyes to how different, how people grow
right.
up.
And I'm grateful that I had that experience. And I think,
Me
all of
too.
us should push ourselves outside of our comfort zones to
Me
learn.
too. I think I'm a better
Yeah.
person because
Get
of it.
out of our little bubbles, whatever they are, and learn. That's always a positive thing. So, anyway, that was kind of the gist of it. I
I
grew up
agree.
thinking that this racism thing was from the past, and the concept of sexism, I didn't even put it together yet
Yeah.
because it's just not. It wasn't. These things aren't things that conservative all white areas are known to talk about, even though they should be, because
Yeah.
they live in the same culture that everybody else does. So, but anyway, so yeah, I guess that was it.
It, it, it's so easy to dismiss people's feelings, experiences
Yeah, especially if you don't know
when
them.
they aren't your
Yeah,
own.
if you don't actually
Yeah.
know
Or when
someone,
they aren't your own
right? It's easy
experiences.
to treat
Or
people as
or
issues.
they don't directly impact you. I think it's easy to downplay people's experiences if you don't see them as real
Right.
or relevant.
Yep. But people are real, flesh and blood, same as anybody
People
else.
are real.
Same experience. People have the same wishes to be loved, to love other people, to be accepted, to be valued. Everybody has those same
Yeah.
things.
To be given value. I think that's
Right.
big.
Definitely. All right. So
Well,
on that note, that was a story about the holidays and Christmas and anti-slavery and the intersection there. And we hope everybody has a
there,
happy holiday
uh,
season.
there's a lot of those markets that go on in the Christmas holidays. Maybe this will cause people to reflect when they go into one of them.
Right. That would be good. I think that's it. So just say happy holidays, everybody who's listening. Thank you for joining us again. And we are not going to have an episode on the week of Christmas just because as musicians, we are extremely busy. I have 3 gigs on Christmas Eve, which is nuts. Yeah. And Kara and I have our last gig together. We're doing our last gig together. We won't be done playing until 2 a.m. At this particular church. So, whoa. Anyway, all right. So happy holiday seasons to everybody. We will see you. I think we'll have an episode before the New Year,
Right.
maybe New Year's Eve or something. Hopefully, we hope. But if not, for some reason that we don't get to that, we will be back in January. We've got some cool episodes lined up, and we'll hopefully have our first interviews with people that we admire. And we hope you join us.
And we're growing and getting
We're
better.
trying very much.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.